Good morning, and thank you for coming. We are here to hear Dr. Verghese speak to us about whether it's a senior's moment or Alzheimer's disease. And the Hershey's Mill Sports Committee is sponsoring this Zoom presentation, and we have Judy to thank for sending the information to me and asking about doing this. And we're doing it on Zoom for a couple of reasons. One, we've got a lot of folks out of town in the winter months, and we'd like for them to be able to hear. And also because of our cherished COVID. So we're also going to be posting this on the Hershey's Mill YouTube channel, and I'll be sending out an email about that in the not too distant future. So Dr. Verghese is the medical director of Keystone Clinical Studies. He's the assistant professor of psychiatry at Temple University. And I don't think that I can say enough positive things about him and the research that he's doing. I think it's very appropriate to us. So Dr. Verghese has a PowerPoint to share with us. And Dr. Verghese, if you'd like to start your PowerPoint or say a few words first, however you'd like.
Okay, so let's see. Can you see this now? It says I'm screen sharing.
Yes, you are.
Great. First of all, how much time do we have? It's 10:08. I don't want to have people nodding off or going to do their groceries if possible.
We're usually good for about an hour.
1 hour. Oh, okay. So I thought it was half hour. So that's fine. I'm pretty good at wrapping this up within an hour. So thank you all. And thank you, Sherry, for making this happen. And Judy, once again, hello from, we've worked together quite closely for about 3-4 years ago. And things kind of got lost in the on the way, but it's great to renew our relationship. Those days we actually came and did face-to-face memory screenings. Can you imagine that? We've just gotten so skewed with this COVID stuff. Hopefully that's going to change. And often when I talk about this, I say, you know, if people have any questions about the role and utility of clinical trials, look at COVID. You know, the reason we are still able to do what we do is because of good science and good research and the way they brought the vaccines out right away. So let's come back to this topic. I created this topic, senior moment or Alzheimer's disease, after interacting with so many seniors like yourself and clinicians like me, wondering, what does this mean? Is this just a normal so-called senior moment, or is it Alzheimer's disease? How do we make early diagnoses and, you know, target interventions, treatments after that? My disclosure is that I'm working on several medications and clinical trials with multiple pharmaceutical companies: Lilly, Janssen, Eisai, Athira, Cassava, Merck, AbbVie, etc. I do not own stock in these companies, and I have no benefit if the study is positive or negative or whatever. All we do as physician investigators is do the data, do the study, report the data as it happens, and that's about it. We chose the name Keystone Clinical Studies for our unit because, for two reasons. Of course, the obvious thing is the Pennsylvania flag, to fly it out there nationally, and also because the very idea of a keystone, for those who have studied engineering, it's so critical to human development and progress, building bridges and homes and houses. The keystone connects the two sides of the arch and makes it possible for you to build a bridge on top. And it takes the weight from both sides. And what we do here in a clinical trial site is that we connect basic sciences, which is a lot of what you'll hear about now, to the clinical world, to folks like yourself and to doctors. Just this morning, I did Grand Rounds, which is a teaching session with the doctors at Tower Health, So we at Keystone are that connecting block, bringing the benefits of basic science to the clinical community. And we have helped to bring, I think, 11 new medicines to the field. Our big, labors of Hercules kind of thing now is to help find medicines for Alzheimer's disease. So I always start with this, and some of you may have heard this presentation. I do have some new information, but this has not changed. This is the creation story from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. And even as a kid, I wondered, what is that purple cloud or whatever that God was floating in? It's such an unusual shape. If you look at it, it's the brain. It's the sagittal section of the brain seen midway. And Michelangelo put God in the human brain, which for me is a kind of a metaphysical message saying that everything that is wonderful, unknowable, divine, incomprehensible, and complexity is reflected in our brains. And, superlatives fail when you talk about the human brain. We have 100,000 miles of high fidelity cabling in our brains. The stuff, your HDMI cable, of that quality, 100,000 miles of it coiled in there. And there are maybe, we think, 100 billion cells with more connections than there are stars in the universe. So it just is such a amazingly complex thing. The good thing is that we all have one, most of us. The downside is that it's hard to figure out how this works. It's like an alien spaceship. And you can't even open the box to go in there and take pieces like you can with the heart or the intestines or most other human organs, which is why brain science is a bit slow compared to, say, cardiology or endocrinology. But we have, in the last 10 years, thanks to modern techniques and technology, we have learned more in the last 10 years than in the 100 years before. This is because of a vast global collaboration between academia, pharmaceutical companies, research centers, and trial sites like ours to help bring these new medicines to the community. So we're going to talk a little bit about the prevalence and costs of Alzheimer's, dementia versus Alzheimer's disease, the plaques and tangles that people talk about. What are the stages of this disease? How do we diagnose it? And some treatment approaches as well. So, do you or someone you know have Alzheimer's disease, or are you concerned that you or someone you know might develop this disease? And I think it's all of us. So people often confuse dementia with Alzheimer's disease. They are not the same. First of all, dementia is not a disease. Dementia is what we call a syndrome, like heart failure or kidney failure or lung failure. It just means this organ is not working, the brain is not working. There are many diseases or causes that contribute to dementia. So any one of these diseases, if they progress far enough, will become brain failure, which means dementia, i.e. you're not able to fend for yourself. The bottom left, you'll see Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia in the elderly, accounting for about 2/3 of dementias. So Alzheimer's disease, if it progresses far enough, becomes Alzheimer's dementia or brain failure due to Alzheimer's disease. And what we're looking to do is to prevent that, keep that from happening by intervening early in the condition. So in the time that I've been talking to Sherry, about 40 people have developed Alzheimer's disease in this country. There's a new case every 65 seconds. It used to be one every 67 seconds, and they now say it may even have gone up to one every 63 seconds. This is a condition that is growing in its prevalence in our country. Globally, it's a new case every 4 seconds. The prevalence estimates are probably an underestimate, and I'll tell you why as we go through this. But right now we have about 6.2 million Americans. I've not updated my slide with Alzheimer's disease, and it's going up to like 14 million by 2050. The prevalence increases with age. So if you look at people who are 65, about 5% have Alzheimer's disease. If you look at people who are 70, it doubles to 10%. 75, it doubles to 20%. And by the age of 80, about 40% of people have Alzheimer's disease. I often say, and this is not a joke, that if all these folks have Alzheimer's disease, we won't have enough trees to make depends for all of us who will need it. Leave alone have caregivers. We don't have enough middle-aged people, and the treasury is going to run dry. By 2050, we're looking at spending $1.1 trillion on this disease. We spent about $290 billion in 2019. Many of the CCRCs, I worry that, if so many people develop Alzheimer's, that their actuarial computations of how much money they need to take in to look after these folks is just going out the window. So what happens in Alzheimer's disease? Most of us have heard of the plaques and tangles. So what are these? So let's step back a little and look at how our bodies and brains function. Most of the fun stuff in our bodies happen because of proteins. So if you move your muscle, it's because of proteins connecting and doing stuff to make it contract. You feel happy, you feel sad, it's because of proteins in your brain sending signals. How do we store memories? Sherry and I were talking about her childhood and her grandfather and how she remembered stuff. Where is this stored? In your computer, you can think of a quartz chip and it's stored in electrical signals, on, off, etc. What about in our brains? Well, we know that memories are stored in the form of proteins, and these proteins are folded in particular ways that helps to keep the data on there. Now, most of us know, well, some of us at least probably, that proteins are made up of amino acids in a chain, but it's not strung like a string of pearls. It's folded as soon as it is made to store it in the smallest possible configuration. These plaques and tangles are proteins. They are snippets of proteins, small subsections that are misfolded protein. They don't fold and they come out of solution. They don't dissolve in water. To function in our body, it has to be dissolved in water because 70% of our body is water. So these are abnormal proteins that collect in the brain. Think of it a bit like the plaque that collects in your coronaries. Over the course of our lives, as we do a lot of thinking, as we store memories, there are snippets of these memory proteins that collect. They don't get cleared out, and they start the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. So the first thing that happens is the collection of these amyloid plaques. So there's a version of this amyloid plaque, amyloid precursor protein, a normal protein that helps to make memories, to fold those things and keep it as a memory in the brain. So there's small little byproducts that collect over the course of our life, and that is what starts the pathological cascade or an avalanche. It's a snowball that keeps growing as it goes down. So the other big guy is this thing called tau, or TAU, tau tangles, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Now we can today diagnose or detect the presence of the amyloid plaque and the tau tangles using PET scans. You inject a radioactive agent, you can see it in the brain, and I'll show you that. So this is the normal versus the advanced Alzheimer's brain. What happens is that the cells die. The fibers, the white matter that sends the messages, stay intact. As you can see, the bottom left here is the hippocampus, or the memory storage place, which is completely gone in the advanced Alzheimer's brain. So the brain actually shrinks because of the damage caused by these proteins. So the bottom right, you see the normal healthy cells which are talking to each other. The forest of rootlets are what help communicate from one cell to the other. As those little fur balls collect in the Alzheimer brain, it causes an inflammatory process. Think of it like, say, rheumatoid arthritis. It's an inflammation, it's an autoimmune disease, but the body tries to correct it and makes it worse. So the plaque causes a process of neuroinflammation that causes many other downstream effects. Why am I saying this? Because we have medicines that are targeting all these different aspects. If you see here, the cells are degenerating and they don't have as many connections. So we are also looking at medicines that will help with neuroregeneration. So this is where the tangles come in. On the left, you see this long fiber, which is the nerve fiber that takes the message from one side to the other. In the nerve fiber are these little microtubules that help to fast transport proteins. So if you see your grandchild or your child, or you have a birthday celebration, you have the wonderful feeling, it's because dopamine is being secreted in your brain. And that dopamine gets fast transported through these little tubules. These tubules are coiled proteins that are held together by these little clips. Those squiggly blue things are molecular clips that hold the microtubule together. They are called TAU, tau proteins. The presence of the amyloid outside makes these things lose the electrical charge, and they come unclipped, and they collect and become the tangles. Now, of the two, the tangles are the worst offender because they behave like, have you heard of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD, mad cow disease? That's a condition where, you know, these bad proteins spread across the brain. This behaves like that prion in mad cow disease. So once the tau tangles start, things start to go down very quickly. They spread across the brain, and wherever they land, it's like embers from a fire. They start little fires there. So the tau spreads across the brain and they cause neurodegeneration everywhere they land. So are there any medicines that can stop the disease process? No, none of the medicines we have today, and certainly not the Prevalence and the nutraceuticals and all those things. They don't really help to stop this process, as far as we know in the scientific world. So there are three rough stages that we think about. One is the preclinical, where people have no symptoms. It's like the incubation period. Then there's a period called mild cognitive impairment, which is about 3 to 5 years, where you have short-term memory problems, but you are otherwise perfectly fine. Then you have the phase of Alzheimer's dementia, where things go down rapidly and you lose the ability to look after yourself. You don't know how to button your shirt. You don't know how to get a meal together, can't control your bowels, and all those very sad things that happen. By the way, my mom had Alzheimer's disease. She passed away 4 years ago, and we looked after her at home. So I know this, both as a family member and as a physician scientist. So this is a very pivotal study in the field. I told you we have these PET scans that can help detect the presence of amyloid in the brain. So at Harvard, they did what is called the Harvard Aging Brain Study, looking at normal people. So the image on the right, AD, is for someone with Alzheimer's dementia. You see the water spaces have grown in there because the brain is shrinking. On the left, you have CN, which is a cognitively normal person. No symptoms, perfectly fine. The one in the middle is cognitively normal, and below you see A beta plus, i.e. they have amyloid in their brain. The one on the left is cognitively normal, no amyloid. And this is the group that causes the most concern. They have no symptoms. And if we hadn't done the study, we wouldn't have known that they have amyloid in the brain. Guess what happens to them? Over time, they go over to the other side. When they looked at this group of people using very high resolution MRIs, the memory center had already started to shrink, and they had memory problems compared to the people without amyloid. So the presence of amyloid, even if you don't have symptoms, starts to show damage structurally and functionally. And here's the scary part. 1 in 3 people in this study above the age of 60 had amyloid in the brain. 1 in 3 people. Remember, some time ago, I said the prevalence estimates may be grossly underestimated. If you factor in this data, that 1 in 3 people above 60 have amyloid, which will over time cause Alzheimer's dementia, the numbers go up enormously, and we don't know how far or how bad that is. So this was another piece of data published in Lancet Neurology many years ago, and it shows the time course of events. So on the extreme left is the accumulation of amyloid, the red line. The blue line is when the tangles start to come in. The green line is when you have changes in the brain where it starts to deteriorate. The purple line is when you have the first symptoms of MCI, or mild cognitive impairment, which is just short-term memory problems of forgetfulness. And on the other side is dementia. The time from the red line, the amyloid, to the purple line, the symptoms, is 15 to 20 years. And from there to dementia is a relatively short hop, 5 years maybe. So you see the problem here. 1 in 3 people could have the amyloid, and it causes brain damage silently for 15 years before the first symptoms. And when you have MCI, you probably have had some amount of structural change already. Why am I saying this? Because when you have symptoms that suggest mild cognitive impairment, it really is a call to action. And the problem there is that it's a hide and seek kind of thing. Now you see it, now you don't. And that goes back to my topic. Is it a senior moment? Is it Alzheimer's disease? It's very hard to tell without expert evaluation and even repeated evaluations. I remember coming to Hershey's Mill and doing a talk in many other senior centers, and people say, hey, is it a Monday? Is it a Wednesday? We don't know. We don't care. We are retired. And that is true. And the problem there is that there are very few stimuli for new learning. You go get into a routine, you do the same thing over and over again. And the first thing to go is new learning. There was a gentleman I saw at Hershey's Mill who was doing his thing, going golfing. He could drive in the local area. His wife said, he looks a little forgetful. Why don't you take a look at him? He came to my office and I asked him, what year is this? And I was stunned by his answer. He said, is it 8,000 something? He was in moderate severe dementia and nobody knew. Because, all that went was, a little mundane forgetfulness and the fact that there are no challenges for short-term memory. I'm not trying to scare the bejesus out of you, I'm just trying to say, look, these are things we need to pay attention to. If you cough up blood or you pee blood one day and then you're fine for 5 days, which would you give more credence to? Which would be the more important piece of data to think of? What's not there, correct? So how many of you know the symptoms of a heart attack? Majority of us, I guess. How many of you know the symptoms of a stroke? Majority of us. How many of you know the symptoms of early Alzheimer's disease? Not enough. So if the one thing you remember after this whole talk is what is early Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment, my job would have been done. But of course, some of you may forget, haha, which is why Sherry is going to put this on the YouTube and it's being recorded. So clinical features of mild cognitive impairment. First of all, let's look at what it is not. A senior moment is just something sporadic. You forget a few things here and there of no consequence, and it usually comes back to you in some time. It is not progressive. It doesn't get worse. There's no diagnosis for it. There's no way to say it's one or the other. But what is mild cognitive impairment? The first thing is a subjective sense of difficulty and slowness in thinking. The feeling that my brain is not what it used to be. It takes me a lot longer to do the things I could do fairly easily. I could do calculations in my head. Now I have to use pen and paper. I have to use my computer. And that, for me, is the most important sign. We have had people who've come to our site with this complaint. We tested them. We did PET scans, and they came up negative 2-3 times. And the 4th time we do the PET scan, it comes up positive. Why am I saying this? Because our tests are still not fully evolved. There are a lot of false negatives where there is disease, but the test doesn't show positive. So this subjective cognitive impairment is a very important sign that I'd ask you not to kind of dismiss, and it needs to be looked into. So what do you lose? You lose the ability to remember mundane little things, silly things. It's not important stuff because, our brains know how to take important things and put it in a different category. Memory and emotions are closely tied. We all remember 9/11. We all remember the day we got married or someone passed away or things that are emotionally significant to us. But what did you wear last Thursday? I don't know, because it's not relevant. So it's mundane little things that start to go, short-term memory things. Forgetting recent events, conversations. Somebody says, I'll see you for pickleball on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. It slips out of your mind. Or we have a new event in the community center, slips out of your mind. Or asking the same questions, asking your spouse, hey, when is the pickleball? Or who's the person we spoke to yesterday? I don't remember. Just mundane, silly little things that one keeps forgetting, and it tends to get worse. Getting lost in new situations, forgetting dates and appointments. And here's the thing, the next line. Increasing use of reminders and technology. Our cell phones have become, a peripheral brain. You pull it out and you put stuff in there, right? And it is taking the place of our short-term memory storage. I have a patient here. She comes for infusions in the room next door to me. She's 58 years old. She used to work for a software company, and she got by in spite of having Alzheimer's disease for many years, because as soon as something came to her that needed to be done, that is immediate memory, she'd put it in her phone. And then when the phone reminded her, she would do the thing for work, but that's long-term memory. Are you with me? So that the short-term memory gets outsourced to your phone or the Post-it note. Now that helps you function, but it can delay diagnosis. So increasing reliance on these technology things could be a sign of early Alzheimer's disease. Difficulty with multi-part conversations. A says something, B says something, C says something. By the time you get to that, you forgot what A said or the context of that. Difficulty following the plots of books, movies, and also looking socially withdrawn. Where my mom, she of course loved family, but when people came, it didn't make sense to her, and she would withdraw and sit in her room. I personally treated her for depression, thinking this is depression. It was not depression. It was cognitive impairment because stuff didn't make sense to her. She got overwhelmed and she would look depressed, but it was the early symptoms of Alzheimer's. So these are the things I'd like you to please try and remember, look out for it with yourselves, with the people who you need, the people you care about. And, community awareness is something we really need. Now, one of the questions people often ask is, what if I take ginkgo? What if I take turmeric? What about Prevagen? As I said, there is no scientific evidence that any of these things work. We can help control our blood pressure, glucose, cholesterol, smoking, physical activity, because what's good for the heart is good for the brain. It may slow it down, but this is best done in middle age. Sorry, guys. But it's good to start. Physical activity is known to help even in advanced dementia to slow it down a little bit. Aerobic activity, where you raise your heart rate for 20 minutes. Again, don't go out and do, excessive stuff saying Dr. Verghese said that. Keep within the limits of your health and what your PCP says. But aerobic activity is known to help slow down the process. So we can diagnose this. I thought we didn't have time, so I deleted some of the slides, but there are blood tests that we do that can help. And as I said, there are PET scans that we can do. Again, these are very early in development. They're not like your hemoglobin A1C or your liver function tests, which have been done billions of times and are done by machines. These are complicated tests that are not fully developed, but they help. So we have trials at Keystone and other trial sites in the city. There aren't too many for a range of conditions, starting with normal people who have no symptoms to see if they have a risk of Alzheimer's disease, to people with mild cognitive impairment, to people with some early dementia, i.e. they need help, they need support, what is called the assisted living level of functioning, where a spouse can help them, remind them how to dress or get them a meal or drive them around, but they're still relatively independent, and most important, bladder bowel functioning is intact. At that level, there are medicines that can help slow down and boost them a little bit. So we conduct memory screenings here at Keystone. You're welcome to pick up the phone, give us a call, and we can schedule a free memory screen. Many of our studies have blood tests for the amyloid and the tau protein, and also brain scans. So there are many ways we can do this. All the trial-related stuff is not available through your family doctor, and we don't bill your insurance either. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And that is the clinical trial process. As I said, without trials, most of the medicines we use today would not be here, including the COVID vaccines, which have given us, a measure of freedom and immunity from this horrible disease. So we need trials, and this is all done to the highest ethical and medical standards. There's an ethics committee or IRB that supervises this. There's informed consent, and it's a process. You can change your mind anytime. People are checked for, safety, whether they are healthy enough to enter the study and whether anything happens in between. If they have an adverse event or side effect, we help to look after it. If they need hospitalization or specialist care, the pharmaceutical company pays for that. And the patient and their family member or trial partner both get a stipend for it. And we do not bill you or your insurance company for it. It's all paid for by the pharmaceutical company. So everything that can be done to make this work is being done to help speed research. So the way we go about this in the field, number one is to try and hit the amyloid, the plaque that collects in the brain. This is a drug that is in advanced clinical trials, BAN 2401. This is data from phase 2. The top black line is people who got the placebo. If you look at their PET scans on the right, there's no change from baseline to 18 months later. The bottom line, the blue line, is people who got the drug. If you look at the PET scans at 2 brain levels, you'll see there's a significant decrease in the amount of amyloid. In fact, 81% of them did not have amyloid. This is a drug that we're working with in phase 3 clinical trials and also in a prevention study that we'll talk about. And this is just showing that it slowed the progression of the disease, and this was clinically significant. There are some side effects. Some people can get a little bit of brain swelling and what are called microhemorrhages. You can get allergic reactions to the drug. This is a drug that we worked on and are working on. It's a Lilly drug called donanemab. Both of these are intravenous medicines given in a vein. They are antibodies to the plaque. So they go in and break up the plaque and clear it up. And this was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine last March, showing that it slowed progression by 32%. And this is looking at multiple parameters and multiple measures where the disease was slowed down. Disease progression was slowed. And this is showing that 40% of people had complete clearance of amyloid. And this is showing that in the PET scans. The bottom is the people who got the placebo. The top is people who were on the drug and almost completely cleared out the amyloid from their brains. And yes, there are some side effects. About 25% of people had some measure of brain swelling, which tends to go away. It's an allergic reaction, and giving people steroids can help to shut it down. So let's go back to this roadmap of ours of Alzheimer's disease. And these studies I showed you are for people with MCI who already have had the disease for 20 years and may even have some other secondary brain changes. What can we do for the people who, the 1 in 3 who have the amyloid? So we're looking at a study which is for people who are there between the red and the blue lines in the early stages. That is called the AHEAD study. We are very honored and privileged to be part of a National Institute of Aging academic study for people above the age of 55, especially those with a family history or maybe some forgetfulness, to come in here and get a state-of-the-art workup, including a brain PET scan, to see if they have the amyloid. And if they do, they get a chance to be on that first agent I showed you, band 2401. They can be on this agent, half get placebo, half get the drug. So if you have no symptoms, you're curious to find out if you have a risk, you can come and be on this AHEAD study, and you get a chance to be on that lecanemab agent. There are other things we are doing, which is medicines against the tangles. Remember, there's the plaque and the tangles, the amyloid plaque and the tau tangles. We are looking at medicines that are targeted against the tangles. We are also looking at medicines for neuroregeneration, preventing neuroinflammation. So we're hitting this disease at multiple levels. This is a drug for neuroregeneration for people with moderate dementia, people who already have the need for family support. And this is felt to reconnect the brain. We are also using this drug for Parkinson's disease. This is a drug that is for neuroinflammation. And this is a really interesting compound, which basically seems to reverse many of the cellular changes. And this was presented at the International Conference, Clinical Trials for Alzheimer's Disease. I know it's a gobbledygook in some ways for you guys. But what it shows me and people in that area is that every measure of neurodegeneration in the spinal fluid got significantly better on this drug. So it seemed to reverse many of the molecular cellular level changes in the disease. We're working on this drug in phase 2 clinical trials. So bottom line, clinical trials is the way forwards. But as you see in this slide, this was published in the Journal of Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease. We need 70,000 subjects taking part in clinical trials in the US alone to make cure a reality. We are far from that. We are far, far from that. We do not have enough community participation. Hershey's Mill has been very unique in the level of connectivity. Thank you to, again, Judy and Sherry for that, and all of you guys, because without that participation, we can't build this bridge. We have to bring those medicines from the lab to the clinic. So I'm not saying come to my site. There are a couple of other sites in the city, including 10. But if you want to contact us, this is our contact information. And Sherry can make that available. And if you want to look for other trial sites, there's a government website, clinicaltrials.gov. So to summarize, Alzheimer's is a growing national and global crisis. It is the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles that are present in seemingly normal people that cause brain damage unbeknownst to us before the first symptoms come up. And the first symptoms are that of just forgetfulness, short-term memory problems. Controlling your general health can help you a little bit, especially regular sleep and exercise. And the good news is that we have clinical trials that are showing good results that are targeting every stage of this disease and multiple mechanisms of this disease. And working together will make this hope a reality. That's it from me. I'd love to take your questions.
Dr. Verghese, I'll unmute everyone in just a second. I wanted to let you know that when I got your information, I called your office and asked to, come in. And the very nice young lady who took the phone call asked me which program I wanted to be involved in. And so I told her about you and what you were doing. And she said she would have to ask you how to set us up and she would call us back. And I know you just got back in the country, so she may not have had a chance to ask you, but when other people here in Hershey's Mill call to ask to come in for the screening, what are they to say? And can you put your slide back to the previous one that has all of the, yeah, there you go. And can you tell us what to say when we call? And I'm going to ask everyone to unmute yourselves now so you can ask questions.
If you are just wanting to find out, you can say you're calling about the prevention study. Or if you have symptoms and you're worried, you can say you want to come in for a memory screening. That would put you in a slightly more urgent pathway, as it were. To be honest, the prevention study, we have a lot of people calling. Next week, we will have radio spots on NPR, WHYY, and KYW. So the prevention study slots are a little more booked. But if you say you want to come in for a memory screen and you're having symptoms, that'll certainly fast track you more. But thank you for that very honest feedback. And I do want to make sure that we do our part to work with you guys. We have been a bit short-staffed. Half our people got COVID over the last month, and we've just increased our staffing. But do reach out to me, and our site manager Laura Seacott is very proactive with this. So be a pest. Call back.
Well, I didn't know what to tell her. So you've given us.
I hear you. It's very useful to hear your. So you can say you're asking for the prevention study, for early diagnosis, or you would like to come for a memory screen because you're having some memory issues. Yes, ma'am.
We-
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to let everybody know, I did call, what's today, Wednesday? I did call Monday and talk to, I called that number, but I talked to a Rachel
Yeah. Mhm.
Rachel Glick. She was very, very, very helpful. She sent me a lot of information. I read through it. And my husband and I are actually going to do the prevention test. And she said there was an opening next week. We actually are busy, so we're going to do it in March. So we have our date. But I would just say call that number, ask for Laura or Rachel.
Yep.
They were very extremely helpful. She sent me all this information. Very, very nice. And you know, we've got our date to get the first test is a blood test to see if we have the amyloid plaques.
Yep.
Can I ask, are there any factors that would prevent you from participating in the study, such as having a schizophrenia or something like that?
Well, good question. There are what we call inclusion-exclusion criteria. So in general, if you have what is called an unstable medical illness, like you have asthma that keeps taking you back into the hospital, or you've had like recent cancer, or like strokes, many strokes would be clearly a reason for us to not take you in, because that's more vascular dementia. So if you're medically unhealthy, you know, that can be an issue. So that's why myself and my sub-investigator, Dr. Littman, who's a geriatrician by training, we would evaluate to see if there is something that would keep you from taking part. So, but if you're what, you know, people call a walkie-talkie, you're living your life, you're going about stuff, everybody has some issues and takes some medicine, self-included. But if you're generally able to go about your life, that should not preclude you from coming into the study. And we would get your medical history, look at your medicines, get your records from your PCP, and make the determination. But if, you know, if you're getting treatment for cancer, or you have kidney failure, or, you know, serious liver disease, or, you know, need a bypass, that would clearly be something that needs attention first.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that connection with Parkinson's disease. Can you hear me?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
You had mentioned that Parkinson's disease.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if someone who has Parkinson's.
Because I wanted something that was light and better, was better for going outside and
Somebody
walking.
is talking on the phone or to someone in their room. If you can please mute yourself.
I'm going outside.
Wait a minute, honey, wait a minute.
Just trying. Can you hear me?
Yes. So Parkinson's disease, we do have a study for Parkinson's disease,
That's the thing that I want to zoom.
which is added on to your current medicine. So yes, do reach out.
So you can do that both. You could have Parkinson's and be included in a study.
Not a study for Alzheimer's. We have a study for Parkinson's disease.
But if you have Parkinson's disease and you're concerned about Alzheimer's, can you do the Alzheimer's?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, they don't often overlap. I mean, people with Parkinson's have Parkinson's, and people with Alzheimer's have Alzheimer's, and you can have memory problems in Parkinson's too. So if you have memory difficulties and Parkinson's, it doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's. It's most likely your Parkinson's is little further along than just the physical walking motor symptoms.
I have to say, Doctor, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's Tom Brophy. I have to say
Hey.
that we've been involved with your office for I don't know how many years.
Just leave them there.
Go ahead, Tom.
Let's try them out.
Tom?
Went away.
He froze. Computer froze.
If anyone else has any other questions, Marie, I see your hand up, Marie Knox.
Yeah, I have a
Please go
question.
ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
My husband was tested for amyloidosis of the heart. Is that the same amyloid proteins that are in the brain?
No, no, completely different. Amyloid just means a group of abnormal proteins that are water insoluble and start precipitating in different parts of the brain. So it's just a generic term. It's like saying muck or sludge or what have you, it's just a scientific term for something you don't want.
Okay.
Gordo, do you have another question?
Gordo, no.
Okay.
I have another question regarding the time frames that is required for participation in these studies. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's the question?
How much time commitment is involved? What is the length of the study?
Well, each study is a universe in itself, but generally these studies are not like going for a vaccine study. They last about a year and a half, and I can only talk about the current studies. If you're on a anti-amyloid infusion study, you would come in once a month or once every other week. Like the prevention study, if you have amyloid in your brain, let me give you a good example. You can be in one of two categories. Of course, if you have no amyloid, you don't come in. The initial evaluation can be an hour or two, but there are a series of evaluations over the course of 2 months. So you come in, you sign consent, that day you spend maybe 2 hours with us, and there are sequential evaluations, and each time you might spend a couple of hours spread over 2 or 3 months. And then you go for the PET scans that are done at Bryn Mawr Hospital in Philadelphia, and that takes maybe an hour. And if you have the amyloid, depending on how much amyloid you have, if you have a low amount, you come in for an infusion once a month. If you have a higher amount, you come in every 2 weeks. The actual infusion is done in our office in Plymouth Meeting, next door to where I am. The infusion process can take about an hour and a half. We have an infusion suite and very wonderful and capable nurses who take care of that.
Doctor, can you hear me?
Sure.
This is Tom Brophy again. I was
Hey,
cut off
Tom.
earlier. My wife's computer ran out of juice. I just wanted to plug your office because number one, it's 1/2 hour from here. We've been dealing with your office for, I don't know, 5 or 7 years, and they've been very proactive in informing us of different studies I may or may not be qualified for. In our minds, it's worth the 1/2 hour trip just to get checked out, see what's available, and you make your recommendation as to what we should or shouldn't do, for nothing else than peace of mind. But yeah, your office has been very responsive to us, and we are currently trying to get involved in that Think Ahead study. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to call me.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Yep.
I'm a nurse. I ask lots of questions.
Go ahead. I won't charge up till the first 10.
Yes. I want to know, are you dealing, well, I guess the drug is already out, the drug that caused all of our Medicare Part B premiums to go up? Huh?
Aduhelm. Yep.
Aduhelm. What is going on? I understand that the prices come down for that drug, and supposedly our Medicare Part B premiums may go down as a result, but what do you know about that particular drug? Because I haven't heard anything.
What
about
is the
what's going
drug?
on with that drug.
Okay. Aduhelm is a drug. See, just like, somebody asked, amyloidosis, is it, the same as the amyloid in the brain? I mean, we should understand that, names and categories don't necessarily mean efficacy. Aduhelm is a medicine that is again, targeted against the amyloid in the brain. But think of it like cars. You can have a old Ford Model T, or you can have a BMW 7 Series. They're all cars. They all have 4 wheels and do similar things, but they're not the same. Aduhelm is a drug that is a source of embarrassment for many people, including the Alzheimer's Association that plugged it a bit, and the FDA. It kind of
Wow.
does something peripheral. It removes the plaque, but see, the plaque is not one entity. There's like 10 different proteins in there, and it depends which of those proteins it is able to address. It addresses the dead part of the protein that doesn't cause the neuroinflammation. So it removes the plaque, but doesn't stop the disease. So when I went to medical school, we used to have a term, and it was operation successful, but patient died, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, the question is, does the treatment actually work in the best outcome measures? And Aduhelm failed that. And I have not done those studies because I didn't like the compound, and I just had a bad feeling about it. And I think everybody's kind of trying to walk away slowly from it, including the Alzheimer's Association. So that's why we need to do more research.
But that's the drug that's out there now that is being prescribed, which is an expensive drug. And it's why Medicare Part B premiums went up, because the expectation was that
Yep.
everyone was going to be on this drug and it was going to cost Medicare an enormous amount.
Correct. And I can't speak for the government or the Center for Medicaid Studies. I mean, think of it like cancer. You know, in the old days, they would do like radical mastectomies, supra-radical mastectomies, take out everything till someone said, hey, we need to address this in a different way. Just cutting out the bad tissue is not helping. We need to treat it with medicines. We need to understand the genetics of it. And then we got into better treatment. So if we had stopped at, you know, just a mastectomy or a radical mastectomy, you know, we wouldn't be where we are. So we do know in the field that Aduhelm is not the answer, and we have to move on. I really don't have the time or the expertise to look into Medicare payments and why the government does what they do. So.
Okay.
I don't think a lot of people are rushing to use this drug. Did I answer your question, Susan?
Excellent answer. Excellent presentation. I thank you so much. Your information is spot on.
Thank you.
I appreciate your presentation too. It was very, very meaningful.
Thank you.
I
All
do.
right.
So, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I can.
Hi, I was wondering what you thought of Sanjay Gupta's new book about keeping sharp, if you happen to have read that.
I started reading it. I mean, it's good in generic terms, you know, but I don't know that he knows much more than anything else, you know.
Right.
It's, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Just if you want to toss this around in your group, if you'd like us to come there to do a memory screen, if you guys are comfortable from a COVID perspective, we could schedule a time to come there one afternoon and meet with people if that works for you, or you can come here. You know, it's easier for us if you come here.
Dr. Verghese,
Yeah.
I think that you would get quite a few people coming to that, and we can talk about that
Yes.
offline.
Okay.
But
Sure.
yes, we've done physical therapy clinics. The Hershey's Mill Sports Committee has sponsored those. And I think that our committee would be happy to sponsor that here in Hershey's Mill. And 30 minutes away is not far for a lot of people. For a lot of other people, 30 minutes is far. So yes, let's talk about that offline.
Okay.
I think you're also going to have to plan many days to come. I think one day is not going to do it.
I like the sound of
I'm
that.
telling you, sweetheart, I'm telling you, that's what I think.
Yes,
I think Judy's right.
totally agree.
Does anyone else
Okey-doke.
have any other questions? Because you know that we'll send out in a community email the information on whatever we do here at Hershey's Mill. So
Great idea.
Yeah, I have a question. When we call this number, the 610-277 number,
Yep.
what's the best time to call?
Afternoons are better for us because we are seeing patients in the morning, but that's a very thoughtful question.
Mm.
You know, after 3 o'clock, we're done with patients and we're like putting data together. So,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Very good point.
Okay, dope.
thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank
Verghese.
you.
Very much.
Dr.
Thank you,
Verghese,
sir.
if you can just hang on for just a
Sure.
second, you and I can talk.
Yep.
Thank you.